as soon as I hear it, it's the first thing that comes into my mind is something from my childhood. So um, there's there's a lot to do with that. But so now, if I were to make myself nail it down to favorite stuff, it probably comes down to Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, and like Stevie Ray Vaughan, something like that. There are a lot that fit into that. Pretty much anything that's Chris Cornell related, whether it's Soundgarden or Audio Slave or Temple of the Dog. It's a lot of stuff. And he does a lot of covers that I only recently, I say recently, within the last couple of years, discovered how many times he's been doing live shows and he does covers. And so I end up going onto YouTube and I'll listen to him do 6 or 7 different covers that I'd never heard before. And so it depends on mood, but like for Led Zeppelin, that's one that takes me back. It's connection with my mom and all of that. But at the end of the day, I just really, really, really like Led Zeppelin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Today, we are getting off the Bruce Springsteen train, but I'm sure he will come up as he always does. I always hate to say the word oldest friends, but I guess we are getting old. But I have a friend that we are hitting a silver anniversary of our friendship easy, right, Gary?
Yeah, we're looking at, what is it, 20, almost 20, yeah, 25 years right at it.
Yeah. Gary Grant is, as I said, we worked together way back in the 90s. We have remained friends. He is one of my co-hosts of the podcast How Many? And so for September, for the whole anniversary month, I was like, hey, everyone else on How Many has been on the podcast. You haven't, Gary. And he says, well, okay, then I'll go. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little about yourself.
Um, you mean musically or
Whatever. Just
okay, like Jesse said, we go way back. I started working for Jesse back in the mid 90s. He gave me an opportunity to move into some software consulting, or actually just, it wasn't software consulting at the time, but just working on the IT team doing a software implementation. And honestly, at that point, things just, my life completely changed. So for those of you that don't know the story, I owe Jesse a great deal. He put me on a track that I probably would not have been on otherwise. And it has been a fantastic ride, literally all around the world. So we go way back, just like you said, and we share a love of a lot of things. The sports probably being the biggest one. When we go back to that, that was Jesse and I bonding over being Cowboy fans, which was not easy.
yes, absolutely.
So at that point, we had made it into the Barry Switzer area,
Yeah.
and then beyond with Chan Gailey and Dave Campo, and so those were ugly years in the beginning. And the fact that we were able to sit around and be optimistic about any of that is probably a bond that can't be broken.
Yeah, it is. And Gary is passionate. One of my memories is when it was like the first time Cuban's Mavericks had made a playoff series, right? And he's like, if you get to, it was an away game. You remember if you get here, there will be a free ticket. And Gary's, okay, I've got miles.
Yep.
No,
what's funny is Mark Simmons actually provided the miles. We made a deal.
Yeah.
I had season tickets at the time, like a half season, but I had season tickets to the Mavericks at the time. And Mark Simmons is one of the guys that we worked with that was a former consultant that had come to work at Bank Tech.
Yeah.
And Mark and I were talking about it. As soon as I heard it, I said, I think I can get a couple of tickets if you're interested in going. And Mark said, I've got a bunch of miles from when I was a consultant. I will book our plane tickets with miles. You get the hotel room. That'll be us splitting the cost of the trip. And then, we'll get the tickets. And so we ended up getting tickets, but because we were a little bit late getting all of our travel arrangements made and
Mhm.
sent to the guy, um, my ticket agent, the guy that I bought my season tickets through, actually got us tickets so that when we got there, we weren't sitting with the rest of the fans. We sat with the friends and family.
Oh, how fun.
So we were sitting next to Mark Cuban's girlfriend, which is now his wife. We were sitting next to Shaw Bradley's wife. Chris Tucker was not very far away from us.
Oh,
He
wow.
had come there. Mark Cuban had given him tickets to the game, and so we saw Chris Tucker was there with us, and it was a lot of fun. But that game in Utah was. I learned a lot of stuff about the people from Utah that night. I'll just say that things
Enough.
that things that I would not have expected.
How funny. Yeah, that's good. Well, I'm so glad you're here. And um, we always like to start at the beginning. So talk about where did you grow up and what kind of music did your mom and dad listen to when you were a kid?
Yeah. So I grew up just north of the Dallas area, up near Denton. There's a little town called Lake Dallas. If you're a Ticket fan listening to this, which there are a few, I think, it's the home of David Mino. But I grew up in a small town right on the lake, out in the country back then, back in the 70s and 80s. My mom and dad split when I was about 4. So I lived with my dad and my grandmother and an older sister in Lake Dallas. My mom lived in deep East Texas in a very small town out there where her family was from. And so I spent most of the year in Lake Dallas. And then I spent the summers and most of the holidays out in East Texas, out in the country. So I think one of the reasons why I have a very diverse musical tastes is because my parents had very diverse musical tastes. So my mom was into a lot of kind of hippie but heavier rock stuff like Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith, Fleetwood Mac. One of my mom's favorites was Supertramp, and that's one of my favorites. Um, she was into the kind of rock and roll that was a heavier rock at the time without being like metal, but
Yeah.
probably the closest version to it back in the early 70s. That was the kind of stuff that my mom listened to. And so growing up, when I was with her, that's what I listened to. So a lot of my musical tastes lean towards more of what my mom listened to than what my dad did. Because it was those really popular big bands at the time that my mom was always playing. Now, my dad was more of a Southern rock or old country
Yeah.
listener. So there was a lot of Marshall Tucker and the Doobie Brothers, maybe the Allman Brothers. I can remember listening to my dad had a Bob Seger record, like the album,
Yeah.
and I used to listen to all the time. Molly Hatchet, things like that. But then he also listened to like Hank Williams. He also listened to Hank Williams Jr., but I'm talking about Hank
Yeah.
Williams. He listened to Hank Williams and Bob Wills. And so I can remember listening to a lot of that very twangy, old country from, 40s and 50s from when my dad was a kid.
Yeah.
So that's what I got from him.
Did and it seems, I don't know, maybe I know now you tend to embrace and when we have on how many a musical topic, we'll discuss and you have a very wide palette. But junior high and high school, did you rebel against what your parents liked, or were you kind of just always embraced it?
Yeah, it's so there's a piece of so that's probably where the split with my dad happened,
Okay.
but not so much my mom, because even in high school, it was easy to hang out with other kids that were my age and still hear Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and Fleetwood Mac and even like Queen, the Rolling Stones, things like that. So Leonard Skinner. So things like that were still very popular, especially in Lake Dallas. And I don't know, for those that are listening, if you don't know anything about Lake Dallas, it's it was a little bit of a drug town.
Okay.
For a small town in the middle of nowhere, there wasn't anything that you couldn't get in Lake Dallas.
Okay.
So lots of kids that I knew, not me, of course, but lots of kids that I knew were smoking pot and things like that when we were very young.
Yeah.
So, it's not hard to convince a 14-year-old that's smoking weed to listen to Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
So there was probably a lot of that going on, but I just like the music. So those were the kinds of music that I was into.
Mhm.
But now for me, I also had by then my dad had remarried, and the woman that he married had two older sisters or two daughters who were
Yeah.
older than me. So that gave me three older sisters. So when I'm 11, 12, 13 years old, they are all high school age. And we're talking in the mid 80s now, 82, 85, something like that. They were playing, all of the Journey and Foreigner and Def Leppard and Styx and Loverboy and Billy Squire, things like that. And so I listened to some of that stuff with them because they were closer to my age. And I thought that was cool. However, most of that stuff was still a little bit slow because as a teenage boy or a pre-teenage boy,
Yeah.
um, as soon as the testosterone kicks in really good, it has to be louder and it has to be faster and it has to be maybe a little meaner.
Hmm.
So for me, there was a lot of Metallica and Motorhead and Motley Crue, even in the early 80s. Some of the Van Halen stuff, obviously, like Ozzy and Judas Priest, anything heavier like that is what I was into. And then, of course, along comes Guns N' Roses, and in the late 80s, Pantera. And that was the stuff that I really embraced. So, like in 86, um, is when I first started playing football at high school. And there was a station in Dallas at the time called Z Rock.
Yeah.
And Z Rock was just all metal all the time. And so if you went into the weight room to lift weights, and we were in there a lot, like that's where we hung out on weekends and during the summer,
Hmm.
because in a small town, there wasn't much else to do.
Right.
And so it was you just blasting, that was really heavy stuff, Anthrax and Slayer and things that I don't even listen to now, really. So
Yeah.
um, it was all super, super heavy. So I thought the heavy stuff that I listened to was pretty tame compared to all of that. But that was sort of my high school thing, was all of that. And then of course we're talking late 80s. So there was some rap mixed in with
Yeah.
NWA and Too Short and things like that. So the harder the better, both from a rap perspective and a metal perspective in those mid 80s to late 80s years when I was in high school.
Did so we have a field trip coming up. We're we're gonna go see Kiss. I mean, all the guys on How Many were like, and in high school, like I graduated high school in '77. I went through a phase where Kiss Alive and Kiss Destroyer and Kiss and Rock and Roll Over, those 8 tracks stayed in my player, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was. And so I've never seen them live. And so I'm kind of looking forward to this.
It's a
I'm not,
show, man.
yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, it's great. I've
Yeah.
I've seen Kiss live twice. I've been to two Kiss concerts. The first one was that the reunion tour that was, it was literally, it was right before I came to work at Bank Tech.
Yeah.
They had come through Dallas, and I was still working at the music store at the time. And so we got tickets and went, and that was great. But when I was growing up, I had a friend who had um, every album by Kiss that had ever been made, the actual record vinyl,
Yeah.
even though vinyl was kind of out by then.
Hmm.
He had every Kiss album ever made. He had 3 complete sets, except for he only had one of the Elder.
Okay.
So he didn't have 3 complete sets, but minus 2 copies of the Elder, he had 3 complete sets, which I never understood. Like, why do you need 3 complete sets, and why didn't you just get the Elder since that's all you're missing?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but he played guitar. So even when we were in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, he could play
Yeah.
guitar, and he could play any of the Kiss stuff, which included some tough stuff. Like I remember watching him play Mr. Speed and being amazed at what his hands were doing,
Hmm.
because I'm not musically inclined in any way. So I'm very, very analytical in my brain. So making music is very foreign to me. I love listening to it, but
Yeah.
I couldn't. I watch people play and I'm amazed. So seeing him do that at such a young age was shocking.
I can imagine. And I do, for those of us who aren't musical, it it is almost like it's magic. Like you'll see on I've seen it live when I've seen Bruce, or like, a YouTube where he picks up a sign, and they're like, I was in Nashville, and um you know someone had a sign, play Satisfaction, and he's like, okay, let's play Satisfaction. And now I'm sure, as someone growing up, and playing in garage bands and bar bands in the 70s, he had played a Rolling Stone, but it's still like they're not rehearsing anything. We're just like, hey, let's play this song. And you're like, how can you do that?
Yeah.
Just let's figure it out. And I love that when it happens.
Yeah, it's shocking. And I'll say it's one thing to see somebody like him do that,
Yeah.
right? Because like you said, he's been doing it his whole life.
Right.
So the amount of time that he must spend just playing music and then playing stuff that's not his because he's kind of tired of playing his.
Right.
So I'm sure and all of them are the same. Everybody in the band is the same way.
Yeah.
And so he probably doesn't grab a sign if it's not Satisfaction that
Right.
he knows everybody's
Right.
going to know.
Yeah.
But when you meet somebody that can just, like, I've seen people do it where they listen to a song and they'll grab their guitar or whatever and they'll kind of pick along with it, and then but in 2 minutes they're playing along with the song and you're like, how in the world can you do that?
Like, I don't understand this. Well, I play the piano by ear. What does that mean? I mean, I can touch piano keys, but I don't connect that you hold these three keys and that's kind of a chord, and I hear that chord and I can make that,
Yeah,
I just it's wizardry.
it
you
is.
know yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Get you burned at the stake like 50 or 500 years ago.
Absolutely. So as you've kind of and grown into adulthood, um you have a couple of favorite bands. And so I thought we just would kind of talk about that and kind of go through your top 3 to 5, whatever, however you're comfortable with, and kind of share a little bit about why their music spoke to you.
Okay. So favorite bands is very difficult for me because a lot of it depends on my mood. I literally just create playlists according to
Yeah.
my moods. And
That's interesting. I had a guy on the phone that earlier, a couple of years ago. He talked about, the whole theme was, I have a running playlist, I
yep,
have a cleaning the house playlist, I have a driving in my car playlist, I have a I want to go to sleep playlist. He and they were all different playlists for all this different tasks he had.
yeah. Now mine isn't as much task related as, like, I was just kind of moodish,
Yeah.
but like I have one called Fast and Loud.
Yeah.
And now if I'm at the gym, it's fast and loud.
Right.
But I could be driving, and if I'm in that kind of a mood, it's probably windows down, fast and loud.
Right.
And then the other times when, like, I'm on my way home and it's late at night, and I'm already winding down so that when I get here, I'm not up for another 2 hours.
Right.
And so then there's a mellow playlist that I've got that's just called soft and low.
Yeah.
And then I've got another one that is like, it's a wild conglomeration of music from my youth, and it's called My Youth, and it's from like 82 to probably 88 or 89, something like that. And it can be anything from like weird pop stuff from the early 80s that Junior and Bob really love,
Yeah.
to super heavy stuff that I was listening to in high school. So, I mean, I could be driving along and I'm listening to Kraftwerk, and the next song might be Pantera.
Hmm.
And it's things that just for whatever reason they connect me to my youth,
Yeah.
and a time and place. And so as soon as I hear it, it's the first thing that comes into my mind is something from my childhood. So um there's there's a lot to do with that. But so now if I were to make myself nail it down to favorite stuff, it probably comes down to Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, um, and like Stevie Ray Vaughan,
Yeah.
something like that. There are a lot that fit into that. Pretty much anything that's Chris Cornell related, whether it's Soundgarden or Audio Slave or Temple of the Dog. It's a lot of stuff. And he does a lot of covers that I only recently, I say recently, within the last couple of years, discovered how many times he's been doing live shows and he does covers.
Hmm.
And so I end up going onto YouTube and I'll listen to him do 6 or 7 different covers that I'd never heard before. And
Yeah.
so it depends on mood, but like for Led Zeppelin, um, that's one that takes me back. It's connection with my mom, and all of that. But at the end of the day, I just really, really, really like Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Um, the trippy stuff, especially if you happen to be listening to it, either wearing headphones or preferably like in a car with a really good sound system
Yeah.
or at home with a really good sound system where the music moves. And they did a
Right.
lot of that stuff back in the 70s because everybody was high. But I just really, really like it. It's always been something that I really like. And then the lyrics to Led Zeppelin stuff are really cool. And I know a lot of it is a ripoff. A lot of it is covers that they stole from other people. Um, it doesn't matter because I like their version of it.
Yeah.
So I've always just been a huge Led Zeppelin fan. That's one that's been my whole life. The Guns N' Roses thing is part of it is right place, right time. Like they had a sound that I love, and they came along at a time when, you know, um, young and immature Gary was getting flooded with hormones
Yeah.
and was in the weight room 3 or 4 hours a day, and all I wanted to do was listen to that.
Yeah.
And and for a really pivotal time in my life, from about 86, 87 to about 93, they were massive.
Right.
And everything that they turned out was like it didn't matter anything in that time frame, which there's only like what 4 CDs, 3 or 4 CDs in that time frame. Literally every single song, zero misses for me. Like I know
Yeah.
that isn't for everybody, but for me,
Yeah.
and there's a limited number of CDs or whatever that I can point you to that I could say every single track all the way through, nothing misses. And yet they did it like 4 CDs in a row.
Yeah. We've talked about this, that I had the guy who does the Guns N' Roses podcast on, and he sent me a playlist, and you went, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
Jesse, no, no, no,
He
no.
sent you way too much Chinese
Yeah,
democracy.
yeah, like, yo, no, no, no. Here, let me give you this. And I've really enjoyed listening to that and sharing. And it is, and you're are you a fan of the whole career? I mean, are those 4 or 5 core CDs, or
So after that, they did a thing called the Spaghetti Incident, which was it was all covers.
Mhm,
A lot of it was like 70s, like British. There was some British punk stuff and things like
mhm,
that. Now I liked it, but I can tell you that most people, even hardcore Guns N' Roses fans, hated it. But as we established earlier, I have a very wide array of music that I like to begin with. So, if you played Black Flag or some other punk band from the 70s or 80s, King's X, whatever, there's a pretty good chance that I was going to like some of it. So
yeah,
it's not shocking to me that I liked Spaghetti Incident, but a lot of people didn't. Um, Everything that they did short of Chinese Democracy, which was after almost everybody was out of the band except for Axel.
yeah,
And they sat on it for like 10 years and just really overdid it. And when it finally came out, I wanted to hear it so bad. And then when I listened to it, I was so disappointed that it was about it was 2 or 3 years before I listened to it again. And now there are a few songs on there that I actually like, but it's almost like the Van Halen thing,
Yeah.
where there's the David Lee Roth Van Halen and there is the Sammy Hagar Van Halen, and a lot of people are very very firmly in one camp or the other. I like both. I just view them as two different bands that happen to have the same name because
You
their
know,
sound was different.
I remember that from our discussion, and that's something you've always been firm about, that they are it is two separate entities. Now there are certain you know core members of the same and everything, and rest in peace Eddie, but it is that by changing the front man, and we just did that front man episode.
Right.
um yeah, very different bands, but both equally successful and equally enjoyable.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me at least. I mean, obviously not everybody agrees, but that's okay.
Yeah,
That's what's beautiful about music.
it truly is. Um, so talk about some of the live shows you gone to. Now, seen Guns N' Roses multiple times,
Oh
or
yeah, yeah. So it seems like most of the time, if they come through Dallas, I probably go.
okay,
The first time that I saw them was, I always get this date wrong, and I look it up every once in a while,
mhm,
because I've seen them a few times, but I think it was '92.
okay,
They came through, and it was a double headliner with Metallica, but Faith No More was opening. So it was Faith No More, and then Guns N' Roses, and then Metallica at Texas Stadium. And the a show or two before the Texas Stadium show, they were in Montreal, and it's where, I don't know if you remember this or not, but the lead singer for Metallica, James Hetfield, had got hit by some pyrotechnics and burned his arm really badly,
mm, okay,
and he couldn't play guitar. And so I think they may have missed a show or two. I'm not sure. But the first show they did when he came back, and all he did was sing, they had somebody else playing guitar, was the Dallas show. And so we were the first ones to get to see him after he had burned himself. But that show with was the first time I'd ever seen Guns N' Roses. And I can't even tell you what a wild spectacle that was, man. And we were at Texas Stadium from like, it was really early in the day, maybe, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that,
yeah,
until midnight, or maybe even a little bit
yeah,
after midnight, with all three of the shows. And then of course there are delays because Axel's kind of an a-hole. So it there's like one of the band's finishes, and then there's a big gap before they finally come out. They were supposed to come out way before that. Um, so it was wild, but man, when we went home, I was drenched in sweat. I smelled like weed because the guy behind us was selling weed. So there were people coming from other places and buying weed from him, and we had terrible seats. So we're sitting, kind of up high, and they're like sitting down next to him and then smoke, like they bought it from him. So
yeah,
why not hang out here and smoke it?
yeah,
So we're just sitting there getting weed smoke blown on us all day long and drenched in sweat and everything else. And I remember waking up the next morning. Of course, as a teenager, you get home, it's not like you're going to take a shower or something.
yeah.
So I wake up the next morning, and I stink. Oh my gosh. I smelled so bad when I woke up. I was like, I can't believe this, but the first thing I'm going to do when I wake up in the morning is take a shower, wash my clothes, wash my sheets. Like
Yeah.
everything's going to be washed. This is terrible.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen them. And then we saw them when they came back just a couple of years ago, 2017, I think,
Okay.
or something like that. And Sean Murphy, you remember Sean?
Sure.
Sean and his wife Ashley, and then me and Faith went to that show. We had floor seats. It was so loud. It was so great. So yeah, that was a really good show, but probably doesn't compare to the '92 show.
Yeah. Um, what are other memorable shows that you've gone to for any band?
First show I ever went to, I want to think I was maybe 6 or 5,
Yeah.
something like that. Um, and my mom and my stepdad at the time wanted to see Willie Nelson, and he was playing at like at a fair or some
Yeah.
sort of thing in Louisiana. And my mom, like I said, she lived way out in deep East Texas. So, right into Louisiana for the concert was like maybe 45 minutes or
Sure.
an hour. And we went, and even at that age, I still remember, this is why this is such a memorable thing for me. Even at that age, I understood how weird this was. I don't remember what the opening acts were and everything else, but now I remember when they came out and the stage is real dark, but you can see people kind of moving around,
Yeah.
setting some gear up, doing some sound checks and things like that. And then the band members come out and you can see them come out and everybody take their place and get their guitars or whatever. And the very first thing they did, the lights turned on, like flick of the switch turned on, and they said they played Whiskey River.
Yes.
And for those that don't know that song, it doesn't start with like a musical intro. It starts with Whiskey River, Take My Mind. Like that's
Yeah.
the first thing. And as soon as he said Whiskey River, a Texas flag the size of the stage dropped behind them and
Yeah.
was their backdrop for the entire concert. And I remember poking my mom and going, "That's the Texas flag." And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "But we're in Louisiana."
Yeah.
And she said, "Yeah, but he's from Texas." And I was
Yeah.
like, "All right."
Yeah.
So yeah, Willie Nelson, very first show I ever went to. I went to, I remember when I was working at Blockbuster before I came to work at Bank Tech,
Yeah.
I went to a Pantera show, which was back then at the Starplex, whatever it's called now.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember it was a little bit like, I don't remember if it was rainy or if it had rained before or whatever, but
Yeah.
essentially the mosh pit out in the grass was truly a mosh pit.
Right.
And we drank a lot that night, and things got a little out of control. And I know when I got home the next day, or when I woke up the next day, um, my t-shirt, what was left of my t-shirt,
Hmm.
was on the back patio with one boot that was covered in mud.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened to the other boot. Like, I don't know. I know I must have lost it in the mud,
Yeah.
but yeah, I came home apparently with wearing one boot and a ripped up t-shirt.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Starplex is one of those where there is an auditorium, there's a stadium, I guess, amphitheater, and then, so there's limited seating and then there's just this huge lawn. And for the while, that was where every summer show was. I mean, I remember seeing the
Yeah.
Beach Boys there multiple times. Elton John, and so it a lot of fun. Um, Willie Nelson was one of my first concerts too. He was playing in Lake Charles, Louisiana. This is before Lynn and I moved up here, and I remember going, he's got two drummers. How freaking cool is that? And then Mickey, I can't remember his last name, but his harmonica player. And I was like, how you have a harmonica player like everyone else toting, all these equipment, and Mickey Raphael or whatever is like, pulls his harmonica out of his shirt pocket, like, okay, I'm ready to jam. So
The roadies loved him.
yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing at Willie's age, he's still, I'm sure if we went to a show, we would have a blast.
We're going in October.
Oh, you guys are?
That's because this is when we had this conversation about the bands of your life, and one of the was first concert you ever went to, and I talked about Willie, and then later on we were talking, and Bob said, it's weird, but I've never even seen Willie Nelson. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so we had been looking for, we take those, we do the little weekend trips with the guys every once in a while, and we've been kind of looking for something to do anyway. And when we figured out that Willie was playing down near Austin, in October, we were like, there's the trip.
Yeah, there you go.
So we bought some tickets and we booked an Airbnb for the guys, and we're gonna go see Willie in October. First time Bob's ever gonna see him. Hopefully he makes it.
Yeah, that should be. Yeah, Bob, as we're recording this, is in New York City.
Right.
He's there. He keeps posting. Him and Brian, I guess, went right.
Yep.
And so he keeps posting pictures, and it's funny, they posted a picture from Krispy Kreme where you can get a Big Apple donut, because before we hit record, we were talking about donuts, and so yeah, so they posted a great picture. Um, so what are some bands that surprised you live? Like you mentioned, like either opening acts or other things that maybe.
Yeah. So we were going to the Bronco Bowl. We were going to the Bronco Bowl to see Poe
Yeah.
and was it Poe and Garbage?
Okay.
And oh no, I take that back. We're going to see Garbage and Seven Mary 3.
Okay.
And Poe was the opening act. And I know there is like a 1% chance you know who I'm talking about. Probably not.
Right.
And almost nobody listening has any idea what I'm talking about. But there was this band, mid 90s, like 96 or something like
Yeah.
that. This band called Poe, Poe, just like Edgar Allan Poe.
Hmm.
Female lead singer. And they had one kind of hit called Angry Johnny.
Okay.
Um, but that was one of those things. That was at the time I was working at the music store, and we went to the concert. And then I hear this band, and I'm like, I really liked a lot of the stuff they were doing. It was weird, though. It was like
Yeah.
very different than most of the stuff that I listened to. And so when I got back to the music store, sure enough, we had one of their CDs in there, and I listened to it, and then I bought it, and I still listen to it all the time. And that was 20 something years ago. And it was really the only, they haven't done much more than that. And yet that one CD, track after track, it's quirky, it's eccentric. Like I think you probably should listen to it because I think you might like it.
Yeah. I made a
And
note to go check it out.
Junior
That's
Junior would hate it, but
yeah. Wow.
and then there's a song called Trigger Happy Jack and Angry Johnny
Hmm.
where I think both of them may have gotten a little bit of radio play, but all the songs on there are awesome and but they're very weird.
Yeah.
Definitely not in my wheelhouse of normal music, but that was one that really sticks out to me. I remember I loved Garbage, I love Seven Mary 3, but when we left that show, all I think I talked about the whole ride home was Poe.
That opening band. Wow.
Yeah.
So Bronco Bowl is one of my regrets, and I don't know how I missed this, but you know, you guys know uh, how big of a Sarah Hickman fan I am, and how we had gotten to be close. Well, she told the story that she opened for Bruce Springsteen at the Bronco Bowl,
Oh,
like like the Ghost of Tom Joad tour or something. He was playing at the Bronco Bowl, and I'm like, how did I miss? Because I would always try to see Sarah whenever she played,
sure.
and she said she didn't get to meet Bruce or anything. She just went in, she played a few songs, then they did this. So she's going to be on the podcast later in a couple weeks, and I will definitely ask her that question.
Now,
But like,
did you ever go to the Bronco Bowl for anything else?
no, I didn't, and I regret that because
It's the
I hear
best venue I've ever been to.
that's what I hear.
Jesse, I don't care if you found the corner seat on the top row,
Yeah.
you still feel like you could spit on the singer.
Wow.
It's so intimate. And when we were there, we had floor seats.
Yeah.
And back then when I worked at the music store, every concert we went to, we had good seats.
Right.
Like even if it kind of broke the bank a little bit, none of us had any other things that we needed to pay for back then. So I
Right.
didn't really care. If we went to a show, we were going good seat show
Right.
most of the time. And they had the all of the regular seating, but then they had the general admission was on the floor.
Hmm.
And man, I've been this way my whole life. I still do this. If I'm going to something that's general admission, I will show up early because I'm
Yes.
not going to stand in the back at general admission.
Right.
And so I literally for that entire show, the post that stops me from getting to the stage
Hmm.
was against my stomach all night.
Yeah.
I was within a foot of the stage all night. It
Wow.
was awesome.
No, I didn't go there, but I did when Lynn and I were dating. So this had to been 82, maybe 83, because we got married in 84. Um, Carl Wilson had left the Beach Boys, and he had put out a solo album. And we were visiting in Dallas. Linda's brother lived in Garland, and the morning news had that Carl Wilson was playing the Agoria Ballroom off Northwest Highway, And so Linda and I went to see him, and it was, it was a great venue, but it was such a treat that, because I had seen the Beach Boys perform live often, but to see him on one of his rare solo, because then later he fixed everything, and him and the Beach Boys are back together. But that I can only imagine being single and having not that much overhead.
Yeah.
The amount, like, okay, because Dallas, there's plenty of live music, there's plenty of venues, whether Deep Ellum or the Bronco Bowl or Starplex or wherever,
Yeah.
to go see. So yeah, I can imagine, there's always another show, and you could justify, well, and it's my industry, right? It's my
Oh, yeah.
business. I need to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought of it like that back then, but looking back, absolutely. But back then it was just the world we were immersed in. I mean, it was all music all the time. So all we did was we went to sporting events, a lot of Mavs games because they were terrible back then, and it was easy to get tickets. Went to a lot of sporting events, went to a lot of concerts, and I went to a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Like that was life for about 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. That's cool. That's pretty amazing. Any other shows from the road? What's the furthest you've gone for a tour, for a show, like traveled?
I know some people that does, like you've done some of that.
Yeah.
I have a friend that used to work at the music store who would go see the Pet Shop Boys in London.
Wow, that's
every
nice.
year. And so he would go to London. He would spend 2 or 3 weeks over there, go to a show, come back, pay off his credit card debt from going over there, and then save money all year long to go back again next year. He did it every year.
Yeah.
The furthest I've ever gone for a show like that, going from East Texas to Louisiana might have been it.
Yeah.
Like I haven't been to many shows outside of the DFW area. Now I went to London to watch a football game.
Yes. Yeah.
But I haven't gone. But I would love to, like, going and seeing a concert somewhere that I'd never been before in another country. That's kind of a bucket list item that fascinates me, although I don't know who it would be now.
So what's interesting is, you have had to travel in your role as a software consultant and implementator. So you would think you would have seen, shows where you're going. Now you've done a few sports venues though, right?
Yeah. I had a job where we were working out in the Bay Area. We'd go to Oakland A's games on Tuesdays because they had free parking.
Yeah.
And then of course nobody goes to Oakland A's games. So you can get, we got tickets, free parking, and we were in the first row of the second deck, directly behind home plate. Amazing tickets. And I think they were $22 or $26 or something like that.
Mhm.
That was awesome. I went to a Durham Bulls game. So
how
that's
fun.
kind of a cool thing when I was working out in Raleigh, Durham. I don't get out as much when I am traveling for work. When I very first started, I would do that a little bit. But I kind of stopped when I got older, part of it being just because every time I would go out back then, especially when I was in my late 20s, everybody wanted to go out and they wanted to drink and they wanted to eat and they want to do all this stuff. And I'm like, I got to get up really early in the morning and I have to be effective at work. And I can't do that if I'm hungover.
Yeah.
And so I kind of stopped going out with the groups not too long into it. Now I did travel once, maybe you kind of reminded me of this. We went and saw George Carlin in Vegas.
Wow, that's cool.
And that was a really small, I think that venue held like 2,000 people.
Yeah.
So that was really, really cool getting to see Carlin in a stage like that.
Oh, I
But
bet that's definitely something
was trying to think of the
memorable.
places that I'd traveled to see things, and that one popped into my head.
Yeah.
Um,
So I know the answer to this, but our audience doesn't. Talk about the strangest place you lived for a while.
well, I lived in Canada for a while. That wasn't too strange. You're probably referring to the Middle East.
Yes.
And that was very, very strange. I was actually just having this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago because we were talking about uh, the Olympics having
Yeah.
just gone on. And I knew a girl that worked on the Olympic committee in Qatar, which is where I was working in Doha. Um, and we were talking about life over there is just different. Like they don't have addresses.
Hmm.
The entire country, there's no address to anything. The way you find anything is by landmarks. And I can literally remember being in the post office. There was one post office in the whole country. I remember being in the post office and there were boxes that were being delivered.
Hmm.
Um, and the boxes, instead of having an address on it, had directions.
Oh, how funny.
And so people would literally write on there some landmark, like go to Landmark Mall, behind the mall, Third Street, fourth house down on the right, blah, blah, blah. It's got a blue gate or something weird. Like there were directions like that on the box for dropping
Mhm.
that thing off. It was just odd. There's no alcohol in the country except there's one liquor store again in the entire country,
Yeah.
and you have to have a license to go there. So they give you a license to allow you to go into it. Um, and you've got a preset spending limit for the month, and it's based on your income. So the more money you make, the more alcohol you're allowed to buy.
Right.
Um, and then inside hotels, they'll have bars, and in those bars they have alcohol,
Yeah.
but nowhere else. And so I was asking her, I'm like, how in the world are you guys going to have the World Cup here
Hmm.
and tell a bunch of Italians and Germans and Brits
Yeah.
and French guys that they can't drink
Yeah.
while watching soccer? And I get the feeling that they're just going to suspend all of their rules during that time. But
So, because if I remember correct, there was all kinds of rules and laws about you going to the liquor store and having to go straight back home. I mean, do
straight
not
back,
collect go, do
no.
not collect $200.
Yeah,
Don't
if
stop
something
and get.
right, if something terrible happened, like if you got into an accident on the way back, they know where the liquor store is, and they're going to find out where it is that you live. And if you're not on the road between those two, you're in trouble because that meant that you weren't going home
Yeah.
or directly home anyway. So
How long did you stay over there?
I was there for 2 years, April of 2008 until like May or June 2010.
Wow.
That was a
Um,
trip. I'll tell you what, man, I'll say this. I've said this to a lot of people, just having casual conversations about things, and it kind of comes up. Um, I'd be, I'd readily admit as much as anybody else that the United States is not a perfect place.
right.
But until you go outside of your comfort zone and you leave this country and you go somewhere very, very different
Yeah.
and spend some time, you don't realize and that we are in this country. People talk about the 1%.
Yeah.
This country is the 1%.
Right.
Even the people that have it bad here have it so much better than people that have it that people that are middle class in other countries.
Yeah.
Not all countries, there's
Sure.
obviously a lot of the Western world is just as civilized and up to date as we are, but and some more so. But until you leave, you don't realize like the racism over there.
Mhm.
You can't. It it had to have been what it was like in like the 50s or something here,
Yeah.
because and not so much against me, although in the pecking order over there it was anyone that's from that general area, not necessarily Qatar, but
Yeah.
Middle Eastern in general. There's them, and then there's a little gap, and then there's Western, so Europeans, Americans, Canadians, and then there's a significant gap, and then there's anybody with a little more melatonin in their skin. whether
Wow.
they be from like the Philippines or India or Nepal, Sri Lanka. Most of the guys that go over there to work in the refinery were from those countries. And um, the entire country of Qatar had about 250 or 300,000 citizens. And at the time that I was there, even way back then, um, I think there were like 1.2 or 1.3 million expats
Mm,
from other countries. So like the people that weren't from there outnumbered the people that were from there like 6 or 7 to
yeah.
one.
Now, I just recently had a guy on the podcast that his wife is going to be in I believe it's Africa. I'm trying to remember, but anyway, and she's there. She's working for a petroleum company, and he said that one of the things that they're going to do, because he says, well, there's some beautiful golf courses, but there isn't a lot to do in this country. But you are within traveling distance of a lot of other places. He
Mhm.
said where you can do that. Didn't you do some of that?
Yeah, we had rotations set every 3 months. We'd work for 3 months and then we'd take 3 weeks off. And we were all on different rotations, so that we were some of us were always there.
Right.
Um, for the most part, most of the guys that I worked with are from Texas or Louisiana because it was
Yeah.
the oil industry.
Sure.
Um, Everybody else, whenever they got their 3 weeks off, they would come home and spend 3 weeks with family or whatever. But I was single at the time.
Yeah.
And so, having done a little bit of research before I left, I discovered the expat benefits. And if you come home 3 weeks every 3 months, you quickly get out of expat benefits. And I didn't want to lose those because the expat tax breaks are phenomenal.
Okay.
And you can make a lot of money, like more money than I made when I worked at Bank Tech
Yeah.
in tax savings.
Wow.
So, the guy that I worked for, the guy at Conoco and Exxon, he was very laid back and very cool. When we would fly home, we flew business class, so that was like $6,000 ticket.
Yeah.
And I asked him once, I said, if I spend less than $6,000, do you care where I go? And he said, no, not at all. And so I just started using that 3 weeks to go different places around the world and letting them pay for it and getting business class tickets to do it, because the most expensive business class ticket that I could get was the one to come home.
Yeah.
So whether I went to Europe or Paris or London or wherever, Rome, or whether we went to over to Asia, went to Thailand. I came back here once for Chris Skinner's wedding.
Yeah.
I was in town for like 3 days to do the wedding stuff, and then I went to Costa Rica and stayed down there for almost 3 weeks. Came home, spent a day or two with family, and then went right back.
Yeah.
Because you have to stay out of the country 30 days of the year. If you're well, you can't be home more than 30 days.
Okay.
So 330 days you have to be out of country,
Yeah.
and 30 days you can be in country. And they count everything. If I touch down at 11 p.m. in
Hmm.
Dallas, and by midnight I've now been home 2 days.
Wow.
So like they count everything. So I made sure that I was not even close to 30 days over the course of the year, because it just saved a lot of money. But
Yeah.
in the meantime, I literally filled up my passport going other places and letting them pay for it. So it was a lot of
That's
fun. That was a very cool job.
yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. That was really great.
There are some of the guys were actually there a little longer than I was, but if completely honest, it got to the point with the racism that it was very difficult not to say anything. And if I had stayed there, I probably would have at some point.
Yeah.
But my roommate was a very good friend of mine who I'd worked with previously. He was originally from Pakistan, but raised in Bahrain, and then moved to Canada when he was like 15.
Hmm.
And I met him when I was working in Canada. So we worked together up there. And then when I got the chance to go back to the Middle East, we needed somebody else. And I called him and asked him if he was interested. And he was very interested because it was
Yeah.
a huge raise over being an employee where he was working. And so he came with us. And so when we were over there, we all had roommates. Well, Azaz and I knew each other. So when we got there, we were roommates.
Yeah.
And he was treated extremely badly,
Mm,
especially when he was alone. If he was with us, they left him alone because we're
yeah.
white.
Right.
But like he wasn't allowed to go to movie theaters or restaurants or the golf course. We played golf like twice a week there. He
Hmm.
wasn't allowed to go to the golf course. We lived at the Pearl, which is kind of like that the man-made island in Dubai.
Yeah.
They have one of those in Qatar too. It's called the Pearl. We lived at the Pearl in these apartments that were like $20,000 a month that obviously they paid for.
Yeah.
And if he came home, if he wasn't in the car with one of us, they wouldn't let him to the gates
Wow.
because they're like, you don't live here.
Yeah.
Go back to where you live. And he's like, I come through these gates every day.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So
Wow. That's crazy, Gary.
it's tough to look at every single day.
I bet it is. Yeah, and it is that's a unique perspective. Thank you. I appreciate the travel stories. That was kind of a curve thrown on you, but I knew that my listeners would do it. All right. We talked about this when we did Bands of Our Lives. So um who haven't you seen live that you're now going, I need to see?
Even when we did Bands of Our Lives, I gave an answer to this. And when I gave the answer, I thought, it's true, but it's really not true.
Yeah.
So what I'll say is this: I don't go to as many of those concerts as I used to because if I'm honest, I don't like being around large groups of people.
Sure.
People annoy me when they're in groups. There's just way too much of not being cognizant of the fact that you're not the only person on the planet
Yes.
when you're
The
around 50,000 other people.
stars of the people that star in they're the star of their own movie, I
Right.
think is a ticket
Yeah.
line. But yeah.
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 They look left and walk right and
Yeah.
get mad if they bump into something.
Yeah.
So I don't do this as much as I used to, primarily for that reason. But what I have noticed, and the trip to see Willie Nelson in October is a prime example. The trip to see Kiss with you guys is another
Yeah.
prime example, where I sort of, it's not really a rule, but I will do it because at this point, and maybe I sound like I'm 50 because I'm almost 50.
Yeah.
I am more in tune with the experiences that I have than with seeing it the actual band that I'm going to see.
Yeah, it's the group that's going. I mean, I'm excited about seeing Kiss, but I am excited just that we're doing a field trip. We're going to go, and as we're talking, we're going to go eat somewhere first. We're going to all be go together. It's going to be this sense of, Detroit Rock City, like the movie, right? Like we're
I
going to
love that
be.
movie, yeah.
Yes, it is absolutely.
Yeah, so it's stuff like that. So if I was trying to make a bucket list of who I haven't seen that I would still like to see,
Yeah.
I don't even know what the real answer to that is.
Yeah.
But it's mostly, when do I get an opportunity to go? Because like if you're asking, Gary, I'll let you go see anybody you want to see, but
Yeah.
you get one ticket and you're going by yourself, I probably wouldn't even go.
Now, see, but I would love, like, Bob, Chris, I go somewhere and see Springsteen, right? Because
Yeah.
it would be so much fun. We'd have fun with Poochie, you and Bob Jr. and the experience of, okay, we're ready to harass Jesse because he's going to his church and and this all thing.
And I would do that in a second.
Yeah, because that would be, and I would love it. I mean, I do think that would be, because it would be experience, it would be a lot of fun. And Junior would be holding this sign, Santa Claus coming to town, because what other song can you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Gary, is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't?
I don't know. I mean, we touched on a little bit of everything. I'll say, since I think we still have the one more question left, right?
Yeah.
So before we get to the question of Mary,
yeah,
I'll say this: as far as Bruce goes, because I know this is a Bruce centric podcast.
Yes.
Most of the time.
Yes.
I have been a casual Bruce fan my whole life.
Right.
Like because obviously some of his biggest hits were from right around the time that I was born.
Yeah.
And yet I know those songs. Like I know Born to Run. It doesn't matter that it came out when I was 3.
Yes.
so he has an enduring quality to his songwriting that isn't as centered on a place and time as a lot of artists are.
Yeah.
Like
I-
I go back and listen to Shout at the Devil now by Motley Crue, and as much as I loved it in 1982, now it's cheesy.
mhm.
His stuff doesn't age like that.
Yeah.
So there's an enduring quality, but I'll say this: one of the things that I've prepared to say uh, before we started all this, when you told me that we were going to talk about what we were going to talk about,
Yeah.
um, my hometown is my favorite Bruce Springsteen song.
Yeah.
And not being a hardcore Bruce Springsteen fan like you and a lot of your audience,
Yeah.
I don't have a clue where that falls in the pantheon of Bruce Springsteen songs to somebody who is a hardcore Bruce
Right.
Springsteen fan. I just
Yeah.
know when I listen to it,
Yeah.
it makes me think about the small town where I grew up.
Yeah.
And so it's very nostalgic every time I hear it, no matter when it is.
What's interesting is, he did a podcast with Barack Obama this past year. They did, I think it was 6 episodes or something, and in one of them, um, Barack asked him to play My Hometown, and Bruce talked about writing it and doing it, and like Bruce finishes and he goes, "Pretty good song," and Obama goes, "Great song." So I think the issue that, and I've talked a lot about this with my recent guests, is um, there's always, to put it in terms of sports fandom, right? Like, oh, I can't stand the Cowboys because they're America's team. Well, first off, we didn't make that label. We don't talk about it. Um, but there's some Springsteen fans like, well, Born in the USA, that's, you know, that isn't even close to his greatest album.
Sure.
But it was his most successful. He
Right.
had so many hits off of it. And the reality is, if you distance yourself from that, it's a damn good album. I mean,
Yeah.
there are some great songs on there. So yeah, I think My Hometown is an absolutely a great choice for a best song and
Yep.
everything. Yeah. What do we think our Cowboys are going to do?
Did you see the McCarthy quotes about the defense today?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, as the head coach, it would be pretty foolish for you to say we've completely flipped this defense in one season
Yeah.
if you didn't truly believe that.
Yeah.
And the truth is, if the offense is anywhere near as good as it was last year,
Yeah.
when Dak was healthy, minus the deluge of turnovers that they had in the first couple of games,
Yeah.
which were fluky, especially the fumbles by Zeke, because that's not his thing,
Exactly.
or at least it never had been. If the defense is even average, this team is really good.
I'm watching Hard Knocks and I'm loving this British that defensive line coach. I mean, it is hilarious because we all love Ted Lasso, and so it's kind of, and he kind of rolled his eyes and like, yeah, I don't want to talk about Ted Lasso, but
as much as he may not want to talk about it, it is the inverse of Ted Lasso.
It is.
Ted Lasso is the football coach that goes to the UK to coach soccer, and this guy is the British guy who comes over to the US to coach football. Yeah. It's bizarre.
It is.
It's easy. I mean, I like the guy.
Yeah, I do too. And I'm hoping, one of the fun things is obviously Bruce has a huge fan base in the Northeast. So there is plenty of Giants fans and Philly fans. And, and in fact, one of the listeners, tweeted something about Governor Abbott or something. He goes, another reason to hate the Cowboys. And I go, wait, ho, ho. And he says, no, I'm just tongue in cheek. He says, we actually hate Philly more. He's a Giants fan. And so it's always fun. And I have been told by a couple of people that I can't believe I'm friends with a Cowboy fan. I'm like, well, that Bruce brings it all together.
You're
So
like, hey, you
yeah,
just tell him one of the people that used to work for you is a
yeah,
massive Cowboy fan, and she married a Philly fan.
yeah. She,
Married.
yes, she did.
So you,
Married.
you can pull off a friendship. Marriage is a
Yeah,
different
that
story.
is awful. Yes, that is always the example of a mixed marriage.
Yeah.
All right, Gary. So if you are listening to this and you're Gary's family, and so you don't normally listen to this podcast, thank you. The Mary question, I end every show with this. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area. He just recently retired, and he would spend 2 days with his seniors breaking apart Thunder Road, looking at the imagery, looking at the lyrics, talk about it. And at the end of the 2 days, he asks his class, does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Yep.
So Gary, that's the only homework I give to someone normally. So and it's very funny. I have a lady that's going to join me a couple weeks, and she emailed back like, does it have to be a Bruce song? And I'm like, this is my shtick. I ask this question to everyone. So,
Yeah.
Gary,
All right. So I've heard Thunder Road many times before. I mean,
yeah,
it's a good song that always still get radio play if you're listening to classic rock stations.
yeah,
Um, I know, having looked at lists over the years, that even beyond just being one of his best songs, that it's thought of very, very highly in terms of rock songs in general,
yes,
uh, forever.
yeah. In
And a
fact,
part of that is the way it's written. Go ahead.
Babe Laufenberg and I think Tim Kalishaw were on the ticket saying Born to Run is his greatest song. And I can't remember which one said, well, I think Thunder Road may have something to say about that. I mean,
Right.
so yeah, yeah. So absolutely, it is considered an icon.
But now, having said that,
Yeah.
I've never really paid attention to the lyrics. Lots and lots and lots of the music that I listen to, I just listen and I either
Yes.
enjoy it or I don't.
Right.
Okay, but I used to do what you're talking about with the teacher.
Yeah.
I had a teacher in high school that we used to do that every day. Somebody would bring in a song, she would play it for the class, and then we would all take notes while the song was going on. We didn't have lyrics to go off of. We would take notes while the song was going on, and we would all write about what the song kind of meant. And so we were doing that kind of breakdown when I was in high school. So I know teachers that do that kind of thing, and I always had a lot of fun doing it.
Oh, I would love that.
I had never done this with this song, and unfortunately, because my meeting ran long today, generally speaking, I'm done around 3:30, 4
Yeah.
o'clock, and then I'm online until maybe 5 or 6, in case anybody in Reno needs anything. But I'm not really doing much, and so I had fully intended to break this thing down, listen to it, look at the
Okay.
lyrics while I'm listening. And I only got to go through it twice.
Okay.
So these are very rudimentary notes, but the first thing that I noticed, and I know I want to preface this by saying what I'm going to say, I think seems pretty obvious, but I also think that if you consider the fact that this was written in 1975, not 2021,
Yeah.
that there was less of a formula doing stuff back then than there probably is today.
Absolutely.
Okay, so obviously he's talking to the girl Mary on the porch, trying to talk her into coming out with him. Now, that's a very direct line of thinking when you read the lyrics or listen to the lyrics of the song. But it feels like when he's singing that, he's talking about something bigger. Like Mary might not be a person named Mary, but Mary might be something symbolic of just like life. Like
Yeah.
she's up on the porch and he's trying to get her to take a chance. You've turned all these other guys away. At some point, you're going to want to take a chance. And yeah, I'm not perfect. I'm no hero, right? But you got to step off the porch and take a chance to see what's out there. You can't case heaven, or what did you say? Case oh, what's the lyrics? Come on, Jesse, you should memorize
Oh,
the
okay.
lyrics. He says he's casing something. It's not heaven, but the
Yeah.
promise, casing the promised land.
Yeah.
casing the promised land is heaven is out there. You got to go look at it. You got to go see how to get there. You got to go
Yeah.
check this thing out. It's like he's trying to coax her into going with him. So the one is the very literal meaning, which is the boy shows up and is trying to talk the girl into, hey, you don't know what's out there. I don't know what's out there. Let's just go find out.
Yes.
And then there's the bigger, deeper thing, which is sort of him just inviting either the listener, or maybe even himself to start your life,
Yes.
to do something.
Yes.
So I picked up some of that. I wish I'd had a little more time to read the lyrics and think about it a little bit,
Yeah.
but that's the part of things that the big question is, did she get in the car?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I haven't heard you talk about this, but I'm going to tell you what I think. I
Okay.
think the answer is obviously yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, she got in the car. And here's my reasoning. You don't write songs about not getting in the car.
Yes.
Like it says there were ghosts in the eyes of all the boys you sent away.
Yeah.
That's all they get. They
Yes.
don't get a whole song because she
Right.
didn't get in the car.
Yeah.
This instance, it's like when you watch a movie and you're like, oh, sure, all those events just lined up for this thing to happen perfectly. Yeah, that's why it's a movie. Because if those things didn't line up and this thing didn't happen, what would the story be?
Yeah.
So what would this song be if she didn't get in the car?
Yeah.
So yeah, and my take was absolutely she got in the car.
Yeah. He has said that often in interviews that Thunder Road was the invitation to join him on a journey. And, so the Born to Run album is a journey. So, yeah, I think there is absolutely, and I was asked, the breakdown, and it's about 60-40. About 60% people say she gets in the car, about 40% say she doesn't. That either she, there's a couple of people like, I ain't a beauty, ain't all right. F you, boy, I'm moving on. Or she's just afraid. And I think you said it really well, Gary. I believe the song is like in many things, you have to take a chance. You have to choose something. And the door's open, but the ride ain't free. And so you have to, and it's scary to take a choice. It's scary to go to Canada to work on something, or to get in a relationship, right?
Yeah.
And so I absolutely agree with you. And well said, sir. That was very good.
Thanks. That was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, very good. All right, Gary, if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
On Twitter at travel_cowboy.
Okay. And you can hear Gary and I on How Many. We try to do a couple episodes a month, and who knows what we'll talk about. So Gary, this is absolutely a treat. Thank you so much. It is so much fun to visit with you, and I love your stories, and I appreciate you taking time visiting with me tonight.
I really appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
All right, listeners, you please stay safe, wear a mask, go get vaccinated. Let's get back to normal, because we've got concerts to go to and we have sporting events to watch, and we just are we're tired of wearing a mask at the office. So for now, take care. We will talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts, as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.